Or even more, I like them too. I have no PowerPoint. Now I've learned that I should learn how to make fancy videos and those. But gosh, I'm really impressed with what I've seen so far. So I'm the coordinator for a program called SHEWAY. I won't talk a whole lot about SHEWAY and what we do. I'm assuming that there's knowledge in the room about the services that we provide, and if there's not, I'm happy to answer questions about that. At SHEWAY, our mandate is to provide health care and social services to women who are pregnant or up to 18 months postpartum and to their children. And very specifically, we work with substance-using women who live in Vancouver. Our relationship with the STOP initiative specifically has been sort of peripheral. More recently, we have had some support from STOP that I'll talk a little bit about. But because we've not been sort of right in the middle of it, what I thought I could offer up today are just some of my thoughts as somebody who's concerned about the health of women and concerned about the health of HIV-positive women, and some of the things that I've been thinking about over the past couple of years as we've seen the STOP initiative run out, and maybe to highlight some of the conversations that I'd like to be having with others in this community about where we go from here. I think Megan has made a really good point for us that the STOP initiative is a 3-year, very time-limited, very tight funding project, and we're now at the end of year 2, or into year 2 of 3. So the ability to influence a lot of changes in what's happening with STOP right now is limited. But I think that there's a lot of lessons that we've learned as a community that have come to us through the opportunity provided by STOP that I think should get us all together to be prepared for the next time and the next 3 years and the 3 years after that. So those are the things that I'm going to talk about today. So Liz mentioned first thing this morning that HIV testing is part of routine prenatal care in British Columbia, and because our job is to provide prenatal care at SHEWAY, HIV testing is something that we do all the time. Thinking about the duration of the STOP project and the emphasis on increased access to testing and treatment, I can report that in the past year we've had no new positives coming through SHEWAY, and that's not because of SHEWAY. That's because women who use drugs in this community have decided that despite the fact that our provincial government's largest targeted investment in HIV in the last 3 years has been about treatment and testing, that primary prevention has been off the table. That women who use drugs in this community have said, no way, that this is going to be work that we're going to continue to do. So that's nothing to do with SHEWAY. That's good community work, and that's something that everybody should be proud of. In the past 2 years, there's been 1 new positive coming through SHEWAY, and right now we're working with about 140 women at a time. So 1 new positive is also good, and I'll point out that that new positive was identified not as part of routine prenatal screening. That was a woman who acquired the virus in the postpartum period. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there too, and I'll talk a little bit about that. At SHEWAY, we don't have capacity right now to provide antiretroviral medications through our health service, nor do we have the capacity to act as a MAT-DOT program or other sorts of initiatives that I think other people in the room are going to be more aware of. We rely on our partners in other organizations to make sure that they're carrying that work for women well, and so we work really closely with Oak Tree Clinic and with others in the community to make sure that women who are coming through SHEWAY also have access to that service, even if they can't get it from us right now. So that's a bit about SHEWAY and what we've been seeing. What have we learned? What have I learned? What have I been thinking about so far. What are the things that we should be learning from the example of STOP? I think that one of the things that we've learned as a community is that despite the fact that we have a provincial government who has been making austerity plea after austerity plea for years and years and years, and how many people in this room have been told by this government that there is no money for new services, for big programs, for all these things. We have learned through the STOP initiative that this provincial government is capable of making large, targeted expenditures in health for underserved groups. So that's something that we can hold this government accountable to, I think, when we move on into the next phases of our work. We've also learned, I think, that timing is critical, and Megan made this point, and others did earlier in the day as well, so did Liz, that when the announcement was made by the province for STOP funding, everybody had to hit the ground running really quickly. Funding like this can come very suddenly. It can take us by surprise. It's a happy surprise, but it leaves a lot of people going, oh shit, now what are we going to do, right? So next time that the government, whether it's the provincial government or the federal government, sees fit to redistribute some of its wealth, I think we have to be ready as a community to act. And I think events like this help, that get us all together talking about what the issues are right now and getting us on the same page so that the next time, fingers crossed, that we hear an announcement that there's a lot of money available for something, we can all be really clear with a united voice and say, this is our priority. We've learned, I think, through the STOP initiative that even when mandates for funding or for program development are really restricted, such as was the case with STOP, it was not up to VCH to set all of the parameters around the STOP funding or to Portland and other organizations that were able to have contracted services through STOP or Interior Health and elsewhere. Even when those mandates are really restricted, that creative responses are still possible to make these things work for a community. And so I think, again, events like this and other things that we can do to keep talking with each other, think, okay, right, here's the parameters. They are really narrow, but what can we do? So I think we, the folks who made that happen, who enabled those creative responses, are deserving certainly of our respect and our congratulations. Some good examples, I think, of these creative responses that in the context of funding that was primarily about treatment and testing, people found money for housing top-ups. Fantastic. And people benefited from that. Funding was found for food security initiatives, and that's one area in which SHEWAY has been supported by STOP. Beginning this fiscal year, we do, as Alice mentioned earlier in the day, the Downtown East Women's Centre does a lot of food as a central part of their programming. That's what we do as SHEWAY as well. And a significant part of our food budget was standing to be cut this year, and so through STOP we've been able to make sure that we can keep feeding people who need to be fed. I think we do have to remember, though, that the STOP initiative is a creature of government and its priorities. And so I think looking forward to the next year, looking forward to the years that we're going to have as a community to keep dealing with these issues over and over and over again, I think the questions that we need to be asking ourselves are these the priorities, the ones that we've been working with through STOP, the priorities we would have chosen? Are they the priorities we would choose again? And if they're not, where should our priorities be? And let's start having that discussion again now, so that we're not caught off guard next time. So what next? Personally, I've been doing some reading lately, looking at some of the United Nations documents that have been coming out that talk about the right that people have to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. And from that reading and from the work that I know that we all do, I think it's clear that access to testing and treatment is a part of what enables people to attain that highest possible standard of physical and mental health, but it is a very small part. I think with the STOP program, we've been walking a bit of a fine line as well, which is, again, not something that gets laid at the feet of any one healthcare decision maker or service provider, But it's something that I want to call our attention to because it's something that I know we struggle with at SHEWAY, not as an HIV service, but as a service that's about providing care to pregnant and parenting women. At SHEWAY, we're often called upon to justify targeted care for pregnant women and mothers because pregnant women and mothers are seen to be vessels and vectors for health and disease for other people, right? It was seen to be a good idea by governments to provide targeted health services to pregnant substance-using women, primarily because those pregnant women were seen to be important vessels for the health of their baby. The real focus was the health of the baby, not the pregnant woman. And I think that when we're talking about health, I think sometimes having a little bit of vigilance around this language is also a healthy thing for us to do as a community. And one of the things I think in relation to STOP that everybody has tried to be vigilant about is an environment where justification is provided to put a lot of money into HIV testing and treatment so that people who are living with HIV won't infect other people who don't have it. I think that that's important, but I think it's even more important to say that HIV positive women and men deserve access to a full range of health services because health is a human right, not because we need those people to stop infecting other people. I think that the other thing that is important for us to keep in mind, similarly, is that in environments where we get targeted funding, right? We get targeted funding for housing top-ups, we get targeted funding for food security, targeted funding to decrease barriers to accessing services. That it's critical, both from a health systems and health services, and for social justice movements, to remind ourselves that access to these services is important because health is important, period. Not because it needs to provide an instrumental purpose to achieve some other goal. Sometimes people who are in positions of power need to be able to use that language, but I think in community we need to be really clear again on where our priorities are. That specifically, I think looking ahead to where our next steps need to be, I think we need to make sure that when we're looking for funding for housing, for medications, for testing, for food security initiatives, for all these things, that access to housing and food security and medical care that's close to you and nearby shouldn't be something you get because of your HIV status, or because of your psychiatric diagnosis, or because you have an open MCID file, or for any other reason than that you are a human being who lives in this community and deserves care, period.